And when you were just giving in, if that's the right word, just giving
Mm.
in, listening to your body, um, finally trying to just wave that white flag, were you feeling a little bit of anxiety just because it seems like it has to be a consistent thing to eat
You have
more
to be very
consistently?
consistent. You have to be
Yeah.
consistent in not restricting food and not engaging
Mm-hmm.
in any body weight suppression
Mm-hmm.
activities. And when people have an eating disorder, it's fear of weight gain that drives us to engage in body weight suppression activities. When the brain's afraid of something, the brain motivates us to move away from that thing. And so when the
Mm-hmm.
brain has fear of weight gain, the brain motivates us to move away from that fear of weight gain via body weight suppression activities such as exercise and restriction and purging and all the rest of it. And so, of course, when I gave into my body and I started eating, I was terrified of weight gain. Of course, I was afraid of weight gain because I had fear of weight gain. That's what an eating disorder is about, as much as many of us like to deny it. It
Mm-hmm.
really is about not wanting to gain weight and being afraid of that. But I guess I had decided that whilst I felt afraid of that, I was going to do it anyway. And another part of me knew that the biggest thing that I needed to do to recover was to teach my brain out of that fear of weight gain.
Mm.
And so I saw what I was doing as I have to act in opposition to that fear. I have to teach my brain that I'm not afraid. I have to act as if I'm not afraid. So I'm not saying that I didn't feel anxiety and fear. I absolutely did. But at that point of having an eating disorder, after 12 years of having an eating disorder, I was very used to those feelings. And I had decided to start overriding them and stop responding to them, which was actually a lot
Mm.
easier than I thought it was going to be.
A lot easier.
Yeah.
Can you like explain a bit more about that?
So any emotional response that the brain generates is really a suggestion, and our brains are just like big computers. And now that we actually have computers, I think they can serve as models to better help us understand our brain.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain just learns via your actions. And so if your brain suggests an emotional response, say for example you eat some food and then your brain suggests that you should feel guilty after eating, and the brain's suggesting that emotional response because the brain's afraid of weight gain and the brain is trying to discourage you, but using emotions to discourage you from doing things that could lead to weight gain. So it uses a
Mm.
negative emotion after you perform a behavior that it's afraid of to discourage you from continuing to do that. But if we can just see those emotional responses as suggestions from the brain, it's like a pop-up window on your computer that says, do you want to engage in guilt? Yes or no? And you can click no. We don't have to click yes. But as soon as you
Mm.
engage in that guilt and take that suggestion, the brain is suggesting you should feel guilty. And as soon as you jump into that emotion and start to feel guilt and say, yes, I'm feeling guilty and I agree that I feel guilty by engaging in that emotion, it's almost like you just clicked on the yes button, which then taught that algorithm that yes, guilt is applicable after eating, and the brain will continue to generate guilt after eating. If you can disengage from that emotional response and just reject it and say, thanks, brain, but no, we're not doing this guilt thing anymore after eating, which takes a little bit of self-control the first couple of times. But as soon as you
Mm.
click that no button on that pop-up window, the algorithm's kind of learning and going, oh, maybe guilt isn't always applicable after eating. And the next time it'll suggest guilt, but that suggestion will be a bit weaker. And you click no again. And after a couple of times, the brain's like, oh, well, looks like we're not doing guilt after eating anymore, so I'll stop suggesting it. And so when we can start to see our brains operate like computers do, like algorithms do, and that we are
Mm.
teaching our brains by our reactions, by our actions, then we can start to see that actually everything my brain does, it's doing it because I taught it to. And if I
Mm.
want to teach my brain something differently, I have to start acting and behaving differently. So if I want to teach my brain that I don't need to feel guilty after eating, I need to start acting like I'm not feeling guilty after eating. And that's really all this neural rewiring crap is about. That's really what that's about. It's understanding that the brain is this big computer that's learning from everything you do all the time. It's learning from the thoughts you engage with. It's learning from the emotional reactions that you engage with. And because we were rejecting emotional reactions all the time, actually, in our lives. You know,
Mm.
you might go into a coffee shop and the barista's late with your coffee and you feel really angry, but you reject that emotion and you don't scream
Mm.
and yell at her and you just, you know, because you reject it. We do it all the time. It's just applying it to this and also understanding that something can feel really true in that moment. It can feel so true that I should feel guilty after eating this cake. But just because something feels true doesn't mean it is true. And as soon as you start to question that and say, actually, brain, I disagree. I don't think I should engage in this guilt emotion. The brain will start to change. It's not actually as difficult when we understand it like that. It's not as difficult as we think it is, which is one of the saddest things I think about eating disorder recovery. Is it's always sort of promoted as, oh, recovery is so difficult and some people can never do it and this, that, and the other. I'm like, you know what? It's actually not. Maintaining an eating disorder is difficult. Recovery is actually easy. It's just getting ourselves to the point when we're willing to override our fear response and do it. That's the hard part.